I'm delighted that we have a panel that consists of both agencies and advocates. And here to lead that panel is Emily Borders, co-founder of Highwire.
Great. Hello everyone. Thanks for coming together and joining us today. We're excited to talk about how agencies can work together to accelerate diversity, inclusion, and belonging. As Paul said, I'm Emily Borders. I'm a principal at Highwire PR. And Highwire is a communications and digital marketing agency for innovative technology and healthcare companies. As an agency, we're coming to this conversation as a team that's actively working towards a more diverse and inclusive culture while also acknowledging that we have a long way ahead of us. I'm excited to be a part of this conversation, but most importantly, to listen and learn from the incredible agency and industry leaders and diversity, equity, and inclusion experts we have about how we as an industry can move beyond platitudes to meaningful and achievable action. Each panelist will introduce themselves and tell a bit more about their organization and background. And one of our panelists, Elizabeth, had a great idea to start the conversation by focusing on productive and positive efforts with an example from an organization, company, or initiative that has made positive strides here and responded meaningfully to the Black Lives Matter movements from earlier this year. The example I'll share is PwC. It's an organization that's taking meaningful and accountable action. When an employee, Botham Jean, was killed by a police officer in 2018, the CEO, Tim Ryan, created a space for employees to have real, tough, and oftentimes uncomfortable conversations about what it's like being Black in America and a Black employee at PwC. More recently, they've launched a number of CEO action initiatives, including the CEO Action for Racial Equity Initiative, with key commitments across education, healthcare, economic empowerment, and public safety. And they're also publishing results on those commitments along the way for accountability. So with that, Elizabeth, would you kick it off with your intro and example? Then we'll go to Soon Mi, then we'll go to Randy, and then Neil. Sound good?
Good.
Great. Oh shoot, you're back on mute.
There we go. Is that better?
There we go. Perfect.
Sorry, I have seen a computer before, I promise. This is not the first laptop I've ever seen. Though it would probably make it really an interesting session if it was. So I chose beauty brand Glossier. Sorry, my name is Elizabeth. I'm the founder of BMEPR Pros, which is a diversity initiative or diversity side hustle that aims to promote Black, Asian, mixed race and ethnic minority professionals in PR and communications and in backgrounds to get the careers they deserved. In terms of brands that did well for BLM, I guess there was one that really stood out initially at the beginning of June, and that was a beauty brand called Glossier, which I'm not very familiar with. My beauty regime is Vaseline lip balm and Nivea, so I wasn't familiar with it. But what I did love is that they were quite blunt in their language on Instagram. They spoke about systemic racism, they spoke about white supremacy, and they spoke about historic oppression. And that bold level of language, because I think it's a very weird, strange thing when people talk about we stand by Black people. That's not the same as saying I'm calling out racism. And I thought for a brand that I'd never heard of to be so bold and direct in their language, they're one of the first brands that did exactly that, stated it for what it was. And I thought that was really, really impressive, especially in the world of Insta, which is meant to be filtered and pretty. And I also thought Dan Schulman from PayPal, he was one of the first CEOs that I saw wrote a post about his staff, his teams, his customers, and that was on LinkedIn. He was one of the very first to get out there really quickly. You know, I do think some of this stuff, I hate to make it seem like a race, but the real braveness or you know, the real courage comes in the people that do it first, you know, who don't know where the trend is going, who are going to be quite bold and not wait, you know, I don't really have much time for you if it's taken you 4 months to work out your statement, but actually to get out the back, not even consult your stakeholders. We all know what it's like also in internal comms, how long it can take to sign something off. He was quite quick. I think he was quite early at the beginning of June or end of May. And I thought that was a very bold move to also do that on LinkedIn as well. So those were the two that stuck to mind as doing really good work.
Great, thank you. Soon me.
Right. Yeah. Hi, Emily, and hello, everyone. It's great to be with you. I am actually newly in my role as the Chief Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion Officer for Omnicom Group. I was just with Porter Novelli prior to that for the previous 15 years. And so I'm, again, very excited to be with this group. So I'm going to choose maybe an oldie but goodie in terms of who I think is doing a great job, which is our client, Ben and Jerry's. I mean, I think they're amazing. Of course, everyone can point to the great work that they do. And of course, I love ice cream. But even beyond that, I love that they continue to push it. They have a whole social justice team within their organization. They are living true to their values. And the fact that they can pivot all the way from ice cream to criminal justice, I think is an amazing example of, folks from Vermont that are leading the way. So I'm going to point to Ben and Jerry's as a good example.
Great. Thank you. All right, Randy, do you want to go next?
Sure. My name is Randy Moore. I'm the Chief Operating Officer for Co-op Careers. We are a national nonprofit that focuses on overcoming underemployment through digital skills and peer connections. So basically, that four-year college graduate who's Black or Latinx or Asian who has that college degree, but does not have the professional social capital to get into the digital field. And so we help them achieve that through a digital apprenticeship program, but it's all alumni led, right? So they're all lifting while they climb to get into the agencies. And so with that, and I love this question, so I'm glad Elizabeth posed it to the group. And I mentioned when we talked about it that I was going to take the kind of the bottom up approach from one of our students' perspectives. And so there's a young Black woman who works within an agency for Group M. And she posted on LinkedIn that it felt so good to be a Black person, employee in her agency. So naturally, I reached out to her and I'm like, I need to find out why, right? Because she was really excited about it. And so we chatted. And, there's big P in terms of policy and the little p. And it was the little p initiatives that really made a difference to her. So, her manager coming to her and saying, if you don't feel comfortable on a Zoom call, you can turn your camera off. Her CMO coming down and holding if we want to call them restorative justice circles, right? To have conversations about the work and what's happening, and for her employees or her colleagues to be checking in with her. And so for her, it wasn't even about the larger statement that they put out. It was about how she felt and how she was treated within the organization. And that also said something to me as well, that sometimes we see the larger initiatives kind of on the grass top. But if it's not trickling down to the grassroots, then that doesn't have an effect on the most important stakeholder.
Great, thank you. Neil, do you want to give us your example and tell us a little about yourself?
Sure thing. Great to be here. Good to you be part of this conversation. I'm Neil Foote. I wear many hats, president of the National Black Public Relations Society. I run my own PR firm, Foote Communications, and I also teach journalism at the Mayborn School of Journalism. So I intersect with folks in all sorts of ways, particularly in shaping the next generation of storytellers and hopefully creating opportunities for a generation of storytellers, experienced and new. So my frame of reference we'll go to a shout out to the NBC Comcast folks. Says Akande announcing that 50% of the company will be diverse, which I think for media companies, and I've been involved with, would be a reluctance to pinpoint a number other than platitudes of saying, hey, we got to be more diverse. But I think what's critically important for a company like NBC Universal, Comcast, as vast as it is, realizing that it touches so many people in so many different ways, particularly in shaping image and messaging in media, that the opportunity then to really look at how news is gathered, how it's presented, is going to be critically important in making sure diverse voices are in the room. We could have an entirely different panel talking about the mistakes media have made, certainly in the last month, no less the last 6 months, no less the last 50, 60 years. And the Kerner Commission back in '68 kind of pointed that out, and we have lots of work to do. But I think for CISR kind of to do that and also put a particular emphasis on development and the notion of developing talent within the industry and journalism and providing opportunities for their talent to and team to develop, but also identifying partnerships with universities around the country to become that kind of pipeline that makes a difference. And I know we're going to get into this, their pipelines and then their systems and their ecosystems and their sponsors who are going to make sure that folks don't get lost in once they get in the room. So that's my example, and looking forward to our conversation to hopefully come up with some good solutions for folks listening in.
Awesome. Great. Thank you. Thank you all so much. And, I think for the first section, we talked about how part of this is reimagining agency culture to truly create an anti-racist culture. And with accountability, I think Elizabeth and Neil, you both talked about that in conversations we've had really in a strong way. And so I'd like to kick it off with you. And Elizabeth, you've got the blueprint, which has a clear approach to accountability for agencies in the UK. Neil, you're involved with the Diversity Action Alliance here in the US, which is working to do some of the same things. I wonder if each of you would give us a quick overview of these initiatives and how they're helping reimagine agency culture with accountability. And Elizabeth, let's kick it off with you. Oh, shoot, I think you might be on mute again.
Okay, well, let's see if I can speak without being on mute at one point.
There we go.
I'm going to be that person. So no, I think we launched the Blueprint Diversity Mark in June. And it's, I guess, the culmination of maybe 2 years worth of work that's going to continue. It's going to be one of many initiatives we launch. Me and a group of advisors that is a cross-representative group of professionals from across the UK sector, from agencies large and small. Every colour of skin is represented, more shades than Pantone. And from account exec to director level, they take part in these workshops. And importantly, we've got representatives from agencies outside of London. We can be very London centric. So we launched the Diversity Mark in June, and the Diversity Mark is really simple. If you think you're doing enough about diversity, you apply. If you want to apply, there's nearly 40 questions that basically asks you to go through everything, your recruitment process, to your ethnic and diversity data, ethnic pay gap, gender pay gap, pretty robust. Training, what type of training, what's compulsory, how is client work distributed, everything and anything. And so it's nearly 40 questions. And if you answer and you get more than 70 points in that you're doing enough, you've got some robust processes in place, you're awarded the Blueprint Kite Mark. And then what goes forward is 23 commitments you sign up to. And the reason because of this, the reason why we deliberately made it, first of all, difficult to get and difficult even to keep, that you have to reapply every 2 years, was it was really important to me to look after ethnic minorities. I'll be blunt, they've had a pretty crap time in this sector. There's a lot that haven't been treated very well. So to me, I have no interest in stating that an agency that's done nothing is got the Blueprint Kite Mark. You've already got to have something in place. There's something really toxic about putting people in toxic environments. And to me, that's why you have to have certain levels in place. I think quite frankly, what we've all learned is ethnic minorities, Black people especially, have suffered enough. I don't particularly want them to suffer more. And I'm also, I've been Black enough, long enough in this country and in the work I do to have come across so many diversity initiatives. And it's so hard to find a Black person who actually respects any of them, because often they've never serviced us. They've serviced the agencies, they've serviced their PR, the look, the aesthetics of it, but it's never actually serviced us. Otherwise we wouldn't still have a gender pay gap, we wouldn't have ethnic pay gap, we wouldn't have such inequality. So you have to have a certain threshold. If you get a certain threshold, you either have ally status, which means that you're doing pretty good, or you get full status, which means you're doing incredible stuff. But then more importantly, once you've got the badge, we celebrate you for a day. you know, woohoo, then the hard work starts, because what you're saying is these are the 23 commitments we're going to sign up to. And what that really means is that it's me as a Black person. I go up to you as a blueprinted agency, and I know that when I interview with you, there will be 2 people on the panel. I know if I don't get the job, you'll give me feedback. I know that if I start working with you, you'll explain to me why I get paid what I do and why he doesn't. And you'll be very transparent about that. It means that you'll review the work that we get. It means that just because you prefer my colleague to me, she doesn't get the sexy clients and I get all the, you know, not so sexy clients. It means that you're committing to diversity from work experience to board, but also it means that every agency that signs up for the first time ever, they're going to publish their data. This means that they're putting themselves on par with some of the biggest tech companies in the country, in the world, if not, right? So that means in March, Blurred, who's got the Blueprint Ally status, Infusion Comms, Manifest London, who've all got status, come March, they will publish their diversity data. And that alone is pretty impressive stuff. Along with their financials, they'll be publishing that. I mean, obviously they don't have to publish their financials, but they'll publish their diversity status. It also means that you know, me as a Black person can turn around and say, well, what are you doing about ethnic diversity? What are you doing about gender pay gaps? What are you doing about board equality? And that's what's the most powerful thing about the blueprint, is those 23 commitments you're publicly signing up to. And if I go there and it turns out you're just really good at writing an application, but you're actually a pretty crappy employer, there's a whistleblowing mechanism. So someone can whistleblow and say, you know what, they don't deserve their status, it can be removed. And obviously I'll bundle them into a room and have a quiet word. Okay, that bit is a joke, but yes, we will tackle bad behavior. But that's why, as far as I'm concerned, when people say I've been inspired by the blueprint, we've done this, yeah, that's because what you've done is the bare minimum. And also you've ripped off a Black girl, because if you're inspired by my work, but you don't do my work, you're getting my work for free. So you're not really a champion. But also what you're doing is you're just doing the bare minimum, because you're doing it, no, you're not going to be accountable. So I'm like, yeah, it's great, but that's not the blueprint.
Yeah, and I know we talked about, you're like, I want to make this deliberately tough, and it is for Black and diverse folks, not white agencies. And I thought that was a very important point, you know, for me and others on this call to really hear and understand. As you've seen more agencies sign up, are they working together? Is there sort of a collaboration between different agencies that have got the mark? Are they sharing ideas and best practices, or do you think that's going to come later?
Yeah, and I have to say, kudos to the first 3 agencies that came on board, Manifest, Infusion Comms and Blurred. Kudos to them. They've been very, very generous in talking about what they've put in place. And what I would urge more than anything else is that the PR agencies, you know, listen and actually take that stuff on board. I'm really concerned that maybe because we are such a deadline-driven, you know, industry, that I'm really surprised how little time people also want to invest in things. So the beauty of what Manifest, Blurred and Infusion Comms did is all their diversity stuff is robust and organic and based on their experience, stuff they've built on. They didn't turn around and say Friday afternoon, you know what, we want to be diverse, Monday, let's put all these things in place. They've also thought about their culture. They've thought about their blind spots. They've thought about other things that they want to develop as well. They've really taken their time. So, you know, for example, Manifest doesn't talk about doing, you know, finding cultural fits. They talk about finding cultural ads. You know, Blurred, for example, do incredible work around miscarriage policy. I mean, we are an industry that's 65% women. We treat women pretty much as badly as we treat Blacks. And lucky me, I'm a Black woman. So that's something. But it, you know, it's interesting that they developed a miscarriage policy. Brilliant piece of work. You know, you look at Sarah Hawthorne at Infusion Comms. From the beginning, she's been reading such diverse media for the last 2-3 years. And you can tell by her tweets, this woman is extremely aware, extremely versed in diversity and racial conversations. All that they've been genuine in. You know, this stuff is hard if you want to try to fake it. It's brilliant if you decide, you know what, I want to get down and dirty in it. And that's what I really hope they take from those 3 organizations, that attempt to think, what are my blind spots? What am I going to learn? As opposed to, you know, we're just going to do what Manifest did. Yeah. I mean, it's great to be inspired, obviously, by them. So
yeah. Well, Neil, talk to us a little bit about the Diversity Action Alliance and what you've seen happen there, what the sort of the goals and the striving there is, and where you feel like that process is for, you know, similar initiative in the US. And one of the things you've talked about is, you know, hoping that these agencies and really do go beyond the chief diversity officer to get to some of that accountability.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think as Elizabeth pointed, in what the Diversity Action Council is setting out to do is get some commitment from agencies on paper with their peers to do what we're calling ACT, adopt best practices, champion the cause, and track diversity data, which I think the biggest part here is that tracking and the commitment to that tracking and sharing the numbers. I've been involved in various parts of the industry. Many years ago, did a diversity study, an annual study for the newspaper industry, where we published every year the track record of newspapers around the country and their diverse staffs, and mainly lack of diversity. I was writing press releases that was celebrating 0.8% increases in diversity, and I didn't know. We've heard of 3/5 a person. I never heard of 0.8 of persons, but we had to celebrate that progress, here. And I think with this commitment, which I think it's a conversation, Elizabeth, I'd love to have with you, because I think part of it, what you're doing, is kind of putting some thresholds in there. And we've gotten some great acceptance and commitment to sign the pledge. We've gotten the next phase is getting folks to commit to participating, right? Participating in a survey that's going to chronicle demographic data of the agency, and then assign their name to share that information. I would hope that I think it goes to a key point here. If there's no problem there with any agency, then reporting your data is what it is. Either you're doing really well or you're not doing really well. Sadly, so we're not doing really well. This is no joke. This is a fact that for any Black or brown or a diverse person walking into any agency for an interview or just for a meeting, back in the day when we used to have in-person meetings, right? We would do that visual check. We would see who looks like us, who's around us, who's at the reception desk, and who's in the glass offices. And for many of us, that was either an acceptance of, well, this is a place I want to work, or dang, I don't see anybody who looks like me, anyone who I can relate to, and why am I in this room right now? So I think what we're hoping with the Diversity Action Alliance is that we've got the industry players at the table, the biggest organizations, Page Society, PR Council, NBPRS, Hispanic Public Relations Society, the Institute for Public Relations, PRSA. So these are the who's who of the industry who represent the best in the industry and the global agencies here. So I think that the hope, which is, thank you, Elizabeth, for kind of keeping that phrase out there, is this accountability fact. Walking the talk and just talking the talk is going to be the legacy of this last 6 months, what was the impact of Black Lives Matter? Well, it's going to be the checklist of the companies who issued pithy, heartfelt messages, and those who have actually made commitments to actually appointing board chairs, CEOs, COOs, chief creative officers, along with CDOs. And if CDOs are appointed, and I know, so we're going to hear from you as well, is the hope and support that you get from your executive team, right? That that you can influence the look, the impact of that company in a way from a bottom line perspective that really changes the way the companies do business. Look, we're already seeing some examples there. Again, this is an ad agency. You heard about the Richards Group and the long time founder of the company who finally stepped down because he actually said something out loud that he probably has been saying and thinking for many years in many meetings, after several agencies, several of his clients said, thank you, we'll move on, you don't represent us. When that starts happening, then Elizabeth and I will be doing, and all of us dances around the company, because it's like suddenly that $10 million contract is going away times 5. And it's impacting the ROI. The good steps to, again, hold accountability, get numbers in front of folks, and keep the conversation.
Great. No, it's so true. And Sunmi, it reminds me of a quote you shared with us the last time we all got together, kind of balancing accountability. And I know you're looking at creating these, reimagining and creating anti-racist cultures across a number of agencies. I don't know if you want to share the quote or talk about sort of that idea that nothing changes and why things finally do change. I thought that was a really great perspective, and would love to hear how that's influencing your work as you look across a number of agencies.
Yeah, thanks, Emily. Yeah, I do have like a little sticky note that I have on my monitor, and it reads, "Nothing changes until the pain of remaining the same is greater than the pain of change." So I think it just really speaks to the necessity of that tension that really needs to exist, both internal and external, to any organization in order to help drive that change. So that's why I certainly appreciate the work that Elizabeth and Neil and Randy are all doing. I also thank you, Elizabeth, for serving as tribute, for being that person who has been on mute. Usually that's me. So so thank you for that as well. But just kidding, all kidding aside, Emily, I'm so glad that you mentioned the word culture, because I think really when I think about the importance of diversity, equity, and inclusion within an organization, that the importance of culture cannot be overstated. It's when I think about diversity, equity, inclusion within an organization, very often there is a desire to make that small, to make it something that is within, let's say, a component within HR, a part of recruitment, or perhaps only as recruitment, or retention. And all of those are so important, but it's actually more than that. It is such an issue of change management. It is a matter of transformation versus transaction. So I think we have to think about diversity, equity, and inclusion very holistically and integrated into everything that we do. So of course, accountability is key. That's one of the things that we are looking at within the Omnicom Public Relations Group, is what should be the markers and the key performance indicators for every agency moving forward. And then also tying compensation connected to that as well. But it cannot just be a stick, let's say, because the desire is there. And I do believe that in terms of policies and programs, I don't believe that you can necessarily legislate empathy. You can't legislate a desire to drive change. So truly to make sure that there is that kind of transformation mindset versus a transactional one. I do believe that in addition to everything else that we're talking about, this is a hearts and minds situation as well. It has to be personal, that there needs to be a growth mindset where people recognize that in order to grow, that means we have to be in a space of tension, a state of discomfort. So I think it's not enough to be a benevolent leader that really, as I think about what it even means to be anti-racist, that means acting with intention. It means being very, very intentional versus being a passive non-racist. So that means that we need to look at every single thing that we do in order to make progress. And of course, that's huge. But yeah, that's how we're trying to attack things from our organization, is to think about things very holistically as a matter more of transformation versus point of transaction.
Yep. And as you see that taking hold across the network, are you seeing this connection and collaboration? Because part of what we wanted to get at this panel is, how do we help each other, pressure each other, hold each other accountable, both with inside and outside organizations? Are you seeing agencies push each other to grow, share best practices? How are they working together?
Yeah, I think especially in this area versus anything else is like, we look around the room, or we look around our entire industries, like who's really doing amazing? Nobody, you know what I mean? So, I mean, I wish that were not the case, but this is really a situation where we all have to be collaborators versus, I guess, enemies or even frenemies, that we really do need to work collectively to drive systemic change within our industry and really across our society. But yes, this is not the place for looking only individually, because you're only going to go so far. We are operating in systems of inequality.
Yeah, yeah. So Randy, you talked about in your introduction, and I loved it, you know, seeing that person on LinkedIn talk about having a great culture and a great cultural experience. And that's maybe when you know, like, okay, it is working. But as you're helping to bring young talent into the workplace, more broadly, what cultural issues you see that need to change? And one of the things you talked about was language when we spoke before, and having that language be really powerful. And it's something that Elizabeth brought up, you know, in her intro too, which I think as communications professionals, yes, we need to really look at that. And so I'd love to hear from you a little bit about that and other trends you're seeing across co-op.
Sure. So I think first I just want to put a check mark and a smile next to Elizabeth, Neil, and Sumi's comments, because they just hit on so many valid points and things that we need to hear and really internalize. You know, with co-op, and I start here with language, right? When we are, you know, an organization that provides talent to organizations. But even when we look at when we talk about economics, you know, we look at the father of modern economics, Adam Smith, it's supply and demand. And as a Black man in America who is the descendant of enslaved peoples, I have a problem with calling my talented young adults supply, right? And I know we don't think about it that way, but we need to, right? We need to think of all of these things, and similar to what Sumi was saying about holistically, about the language that we're using. So I call all of our young people talent. Organizations need to realize that they are not looking for talent in the right places. Talent is not only at elite institutions. You have talent at HBCUs. You have talent at your city and state universities. Many of these students have the competencies and qualities that we want in our workforce, right? They've managed 2 to 3 jobs while they were working. They couldn't do the internship experiences because they had the jobs. So they've done everything that we've told them to do. Yet they cannot find a job upon completion. So we have failed them. Neil brought up, you know, pipelines and systems. It's so true. We have failed them systemically. And then we say that there is no Black talent. You know, I know Wells Fargo came under fire not too long ago for saying that they could not find Black talent. And I'm saying to myself, well, where the hell are you looking? Because I have thousands of young people that we are serving around this country that are talented, hungry, capable, and ready to go into a workplace and thrive. We know within our organization, 53% of recent college graduates around the United States are underemployed or unemployed. 65% of recent Black and Latinx college graduates are underemployed or unemployed. The problem is not with them. The problem is with the system. And we need employers, and there are employers doing great work. And I want to give a shout out to Sumi and her organization. We have 36 of our talented co-opers around the country and New York and California working in an organization. When we speak about language and them changing some of the grassroots strategies to get our talent in the door. One example is our Google Talent Match, right? So Google invites their partners, their industry partners in. You know, one of Omnicom's agencies, Hearts and Sciences, they're there every single time. I've spoken to some of their directors and they're like, we love to come here because we find the diverse talent that we want. But it's not just about getting a young Black or brown person in the door. It's what happens after they're in the door. And that's the other piece that I think that we often forget. You know, it's not just about, you know, we can all do a statistical analysis and say, I have X amount of Black or African Americans working within my organization. But let's look at that at every level, right? What's the methodology that you have around talent development? right? Can they bring their full selves to work? You know, Audre Lorde said, and I love this quote about, you know, there's no such thing as a single issue struggle because we don't live single issue lives, right? So looking at intersectionality and how the intersections of our diversity hit one another, right? Just because I'm a Black male doesn't mean I have the same struggle as another Black male. And what am I doing to create an environment of inclusivity? Right? When I talk about development and helping folks feel a sense of belonging, and we know belonging is equivalent to retention, right? Folks who feel like they belong in their workplace are going to want to stay there and going to want to grow. So I know I'm saying a lot, it's kind of spaghetti on the wall, but I feel that language is one of the proxies, but also it's how agencies and how corporations are really looking at every single policy, realizing that the workplace is extremely nepotistic. And in order for us to change that, we need to really diversify our recruiting and hiring strategies and really look at our talent development strategies at every single rung within the organization.
Yeah, and one of the things you mentioned on a past call for a specific example there was like talking about what skills we want from an employee to what are the attributes we want in that person. And I thought that was such a great way to really shift your mindset to, okay, what have they done in their past internships, or what have they really achieved here in the specifics, to talk about what attributes are they bringing to the table and how can that fit into our organization. So I really appreciated that. Well, why don't we talk about from pipeline to retention and kind of move into that really important piece of the conversation, you know, from building a strong pipeline, looking for sponsorship and mentorship, both within the organization and outside the organization. Elizabeth, let's bring it back to you, if you don't mind, about kind of what you see happen further in the career path. You know, there's so many diverse initiatives that you've mentioned. And you also mentioned, you know, there's a real lack of Black VPs. And so I would love to hear kind of what you've seen there. And also, as part of the Blueprint and other initiatives, what are you seeing change? And what can agency leaders take away from this call?
Yeah, sure. I mean, just before I answer the question, I want to be a bit annoying and jump onto a point previously, though, about the accountability stuff. I think the accountability stuff is really important. And what I think that, you know, I want to get to in terms of the Blueprint is that when you look at the 23 commitments that people are signing up to, I think you want to flip it and ask why an agency wouldn't want to sign up to those commitments. Because actually, all these things have worked in an agency's favor. The thing with the Blueprint is it's not just fundamentally good for Black, Asian, mixed race, ethnic minority pros. Going back almost to the Black Lives Matter, we're all safe if Black people are safe, right? You, as an organization, women will do better with a Blueprint. Parents will do better with a Blueprint. And judging by all the emails I get from LGBTQ plus people, I suspect they'll do better for the Blueprint. And the reason why I say go back to the Blueprint is flip it as this. If the Blueprint says there's going to be 2 people on your interview panel, why wouldn't you want that? If the Blueprint says I will get feedback from my interview, why wouldn't you want that? If the Blueprint says that pay and performance will be transparent, why would your agency boss not want pay and performance to be transparent? Why wouldn't they want everyone to have equal dibs at, you know, the great work, the great clients that come through? None of that favors the employees, obviously. It favors an agency that wants to nurture bad agency practices. You know, as much as it is hard to get the diversity mark, there is a part of me that wants us to realize that the things that the diversity mark Blueprint asks you to do shouldn't make, you know, shouldn't make your eyes roll to the back of your skull. These, I think, are normal things that we should ask an organization to do in 2020. Why shouldn't an organization have a zero tolerance approach to microaggression and racism? Why should diversity not be from work experience to boardroom? I feel like the question shouldn't be why should people sign up? The question should be what is so horrific that someone doesn't want to sign up, because that would tell you about your problematic agency. Whatever argument they say about not wanting to put these things in place, you know you haven't got a good one there. Simple as that. But going back to the other point about you know, the spread of talent, the reason why it's so important to look at it is because you know, a lot of people have told me, and they whisper about it, and I wish someone could be bold enough to say it out loud, but I know a lot of big agencies that have a retention problem when it comes to BMEs. And what we can do is, you know, by BME, for those people outside of England, is Black, minority, ethnic, but Black, Asian, mixed race, ethnic, minority, pros. It's an identity marker, not a category, not an identity marker. So what I think is really interesting is that people would whisper this, you know, and tell me we have a retention problem. And what we can do is we can decide to be racist and say that's because Black, Asian, mixed race and ethnic minority people are incapable of staying at a job. Or we could turn around and say what's going on in your working culture, they keep leaving. Because that to me feels like the problem there. And it feels like it's taken a lot of people a long time to get there. The other issue around the pipeline and the focus on new people and young people getting in is it means that, first of all, you don't have to work on your retention problem. That means you get away with your toxic working culture. You get away with perpetuating a racist myth that, oh, the Asians keep leaving because they can't hack PR. The Blacks keep leaving because they can't hack PR, without ever putting a mirror to your face at all. So for me, actually turning around and saying it's going to go from, you know, work experience to boardroom level makes you accountable and have to deal with all the crap that goes in. But also, you know, to be quite blunt, there's something really weird I sometimes see when I go to organizations that are obsessed with diversity initiatives. There's this really weird thing of people wanting young Black people to go into their organizations, and they want to do this thing afterwards. They take a picture with a whole load of young Black men and they put it on their LinkedIn. It's really vulgar. To me, it's all a little bit new form of colonialism. You know, it's like the missionaries that go to Uganda want to get a picture with a young Ugandan kid. It's like, you know, these CEOs that say, give me a young Black boy, bring him in for a day, I'll turn back PR, I'll take a picture with him, he'll never ever work here, but I want to share that on LinkedIn like it mattered to me. And it's to cut that kind of crap, really. It's you know, with all due respect, you know, ethnic minorities are not pets for you to use for your LinkedIn, you know, content. So it's I always think, you know, the most progressive companies, the ones that talk to me about an ethnic minority being in a director position, rather than those people that want more and more, you know, junior people to come in through the pipeline. But also, the other thing that's really problematic to me is, like, if there's one thing that my people can get is low paid, insecure work. So calling me to say there's an internship in PR, you know, I think there are some of us who would probably have a better deal working in a supermarket part-time than being an intern in a big agency. So yeah, it's important. If you're going to do equality and diversity, you can't do it from this framework of we want that one and only in that type of job. That's not equality and diversity. That's a very toxic thing you're doing, and that's based on whatever inequality is going on in your head. And it can't also be, it's, you know, it sounds quite blunt, but I say you can't do diversity from a white-centric point of view. You have to do it from a diverse-centric point of view. You can't sit and turn around and say which one of us you want in the office, at which level, at which pay. Whatever that is, that's not equality and diversity. That's some toxic crap that shouldn't be allowed.
But Elizabeth, you can't have more than one of us in any organization at a certain level. Oh my gosh.
That was my rule. I media. It's me or the other Black girl.
I mean, it's you know, I mock and I don't jest, but that's, unfortunately, we've all been in that situation where I mean, quite often I've been the one that left, and it was kind of like, well, there goes our diversity. And I've also been on the other side, certainly in many, many years of working with senior executives in media who say, well, you know, we had one, didn't work out, and, you know, I just don't know what else to do now. And I'm kind of like, oh, well, so to me, this is, you know, if you, you know, if you're business executives and you're looking at building your company and you're doing all the great things that you would do in terms of building out your budgets, building out your client prospects, identifying your existing clients, who you're going to retain, who you need, what new markets you need to go after, then what's so hard about, as Elizabeth said, of you know, recruiting and retaining diverse folks to do good work? You know, you know, very much in the equation, it's to me kind of related from a quote, you know, DEI equals ROI. That just goes, you know, over and over again, from Korn Ferry to McKinsey to other industry studies that shows the more the diverse the organizations are, particularly with ethnically and race-wise, the more successful these companies are going to provide greater value greater value, VALUE, that's dollars, to their clients, to their customers. So yeah, that's one part of it that then says, as I look at it from the prism from the National Black Public Relations Society, we're 20 plus years old, started by the late Pat Tobin in LA, who had her own boutique firm, who was able during that time in late 90s, if you recall, Toyota was trying to make inroads into the US. And she kind of called the question and said, well, how are you doing on the diverse standpoint? And was able to sign up Toyota as one of her clients. And that put her kind of on the map. And that only raised, in her mind, the ability for firms like Pat Tobin's to get the exposure they need to get clients like Toyota, no less, for the young Neil Foots and Randys and Sunis and Elizabeths at these major agencies who want to say, wow, I can handle the Home Depot account. I got some ideas. Can I be at the table? Why won't you give me a chance? I've seen many other white people fail at doing this. Why don't you at least give me a chance to even have that chance to fail? You won't even give me that chance. You just say, I'm not ready yet. And then you won't tell me, well, what do I need to do to get ready? But just keep on at it. Keep on doing good work. That means nothing. There has to be a system. There has to be a commitment. There has to be a reality that if you want to be around 5 years from now, 10 years from now, 20 years from now, that if you're not committed to this, then quite honestly, brands don't need you, because there'll be better brands who will do this a lot better than needing an agency to help spread the word about what they do, because you don't get it and we do. So I think that to me, again, for us, in this conversation seems very obvious. And for all of us, it's a daily conversation. It's not once every quarter. It's not at the annual meeting. It's not at the strategic planning session. This is a daily conversation. I don't go a day, the day doesn't go by where I don't have this conversation. Certainly from, again, the prism of MBPRS, and with some of my students who are diverse, who want to get in the business. They're like, Neil, what do I need to do? How do I get the opportunity? Man, you know the context. It's like, look, I'll call them up. I'll put you in front of them. Unfortunately, some folks, get that opportunity. Others, unfortunately don't. But, the commitment from our end is there. And I hope that we can get folks who will not be flustered by the sheer notion of just doing good business.
Yeah. And, you mentioned that pairing between, yes, there are the outside groups and advocates that are really helping to move this forward, but it has to exist within the agency. So Sunmi, I'd love to hear if there's anything that you want to talk about in terms of when you've laid out the roadmap, what you're thinking about with mentorship, championship, retention. What can we learn from what you all have thought through?
Well, one thing I'd just like to build on that Neil was referring to, I think it's so important that we recognize, particularly now, certainly always, but diversity, equity, and inclusion, it is definitely a moral imperative without question. It is also a business imperative without question, but also it is even more than that. So often when we think about the business imperative, we think about, what are the extras that we can get, right? So what are the pluses, the collaboration, and all of that kind of stuff. But actually, what I think this period of time has shown us even more is it's not even the pluses. It's the deficit that we are operating in this moment. And I think what has been really, really clear and continues to be clear across our industry, and not just agencies, but I think also within communications departments of large organizations, organizations of any size, is that we lack a common experience, and therefore we lack a common language. Earlier, Randy was talking about language. I think about language as a lie detector. I can immediately tell based on the language that people use, when they hesitate, when they don't, what they're comfortable with, what they're not. And I think even when people say, could you give me a glossary of the words that I can and can't use? Sure, I can get you, I guess, a glossary, but still, even that glossary is that you can tell even by tone and comfort. So I just go back to just the words that we use, particularly as communicators. My God, if we aren't able to communicate in this particular moment with a certain like common experience and people at the table that can contribute to the richness of what it means to be communications professionals, we are really, really operating in deficit. So all of that really speaks to the need for us to move with urgency, with intention, to really change, make dramatic change. And so much of what Elizabeth was talking about in terms of the blueprint, and what Neil has been talking about in terms of the Diversity Action Alliance and those commitments there, and what Randy has been talking about in terms of talent and pipeline development and just giving people opportunities, we have to really move with urgency across all of those spheres. The one thing that I would really just kind of add to all of that is that it's so important to understand the power structures, and that I think we just sometimes just forget, like, why can't people just do certain things? I'm like, well, let's not forget the power structures that are in every situation. Sometimes when we get to a certain level, we assume that that doesn't exist, but no. From the moment we walk in the door, those power structures are very evident to anybody that's walking in. And so when we talk about like, oh, be your whole self and all this kind of stuff, well, are you creating a safe environment in which to do so? Do people have the psychological safety in order to do so? And particularly now, as we are in this period of, COVID 45. Sorry, did I say COVID 45? I meant COVID-19. I guess I meant COVID 45. Whoops. COVID-19, COVID 16, 19, and all of it is that we are operating under a tremendous amount of stress that we have to be very, very aware of.
Yeah. Yep. Now that's, and do we snap, Randy, right? We snap. We're like, yes, that's right. So Randy, you see this from the people that, come into agencies, particularly, when you're seeing young people come into an agency that's not diverse, it's primarily a white space. What are the things that you're seeing that they can do to prioritize that belonging from day one? Clearly it is make additional actions and create more diversity at all levels, but what are you seeing for agencies that are getting started here, or what advice do you have?
Yeah, that's a great question. And I think, Elizabeth, Neil, and Sumi hit on a lot of this. And I like to think of the word community. So how are agencies and corporations through their practices building community within an organization? So one great example, is affinity groups. Are there affinity groups within organizations that folks can join and be a part of? That's one way. I also think that, partnerships, private-public partnerships are so important, right? And I know Neil touched on that with his organization. A lot of our young people go through these systems and go through organizations that partner with these employers. That relationship doesn't need to stop, right? So a great example of that is many of our talented co-opers, when they're working in agencies, they're able to come back. Many of them are who we call alumni captains, where they're teaching in the evenings. Our program has a social work department where we're able to help our young people unpack some of these things. So if I'm dealing with something in the workplace, I'm able to come back to my external community and be able to unpack some of that as well. And that has been something through some of the data collection that we've done with employers that they have mentioned has been a big support, and they've seen growth within their organization or their talent, because we're kind of locking arms and wrapping our arms around the young person. The other thing I want to mention, this is kind of off topic, but it's co-op, we focus on four-year first generation college graduates. Much of my career has also been in higher education and working at the nexus between industry and college. So, I worked at a brand new community college in New York City. And one of the things that I also want to say and implore folks, the four-year degree is not the only marker for talent. And when specifically in the United States, white wealth is 7 times greater than that of Black folks and 5 times greater than that of Latinx people. And when we correlate that to, college and tuition and, barriers to access, we can't expect that all the diverse talent that we want, that everyone is going to have a 4-year degree. So when we start to talk about the skills and competencies conversation, we need to take a good hard look at our job descriptions. Do I need this person to have a 4-year degree? There is great talent with folks who have a certificate from a community college program and have great lived life experiences as well. And so I know that was a pivot to the question you asked me, Emily, but I also want to point that out as well. I think that's important. I also think there are a lot of organizations that are using some of the analytics around hiring. I know there's one called Parent, where they're kind of looking at, how do we do some of the blind hiring? So for example, I've had students over the years who, I'm from Jamaica, Queens myself, New York, and anyone from Queens, if you're from Jamaica, you have to put the Jamaica in front of the Queens, right? But if I put that on a job application, someone may say, oh, he's from here. So many of our students from the Bronx, we serve a large population, or from Harlem, have started putting Hamilton Heights. That angers me. No, you're from Harlem, right? Just because of gentrification and they want to change the name and move it up a few blocks, you are from Harlem, right? Or if you have a name that sounds ethnic, right? We know that folks are discriminated against on that as well. So I really do think the power does lie with the employers, right? And I think we can do a lot more. And I didn't know as much about the blueprint. I need to read up on that, Elizabeth, and learn more. And, I want to say that, Neil, for the work that you do, that is so, we need, employers should be knocking down your door to ask, where can we get talent, right? Sunmi, you all are speaking, by example, because many of the young talent that I work with enjoy working at Omnicom. So just wanted to point out that the work is happening, but it's not happening. There are bright spots, right? What we need to do is make best practice common practice, and we have a long way to go.
I just want to dive in there real quick, Emily. Randy, I grew up in Bed-Stuy, and so that question of throughout my career was always, well, Neil, where are you from? And I would just say I was from Bed-Stuy, and inevitably people, mainly the white males who were interviewing me, would say, well, oh my, how did you get out of there? Right? Like B-52 bus, A train, GG train. How else? My dad had a car too. So I think that framing of our youth and talent sometimes is still a barrier to entry, and suddenly they're stigmatized for where they come from and not what they bring to the table. Which I think you all have really done, really hit a key point. A key issue is how do we at least get folks in the door for these conversations to create opportunities that look, I know this, again, not a day that goes through that I'm not working with my students to say, well, here's what you have to do. If you want to be in this industry, you got to step it up. Here's what you need to be doing better. You need to write better. There are those factors that I'm sure, Randy and Elizabeth and Sumi and I'm sure Emily, you do a fair amount of young talent of just saying, look, I want you in here, but here's what we got to do. And then, the heartbreaking thing for us is when we have this young talent sitting across the table from us and they say, well, I've applied to 25 places and no one has called me back. And I'm like, who did you? And I'm like, no, they just said that they were like, we're down with the cause. And so I hope in this conversation today that we can kind of eliminate that void of, I don't know where, I don't know who, that you've got a network here, certainly Emily, certainly Sumi, that you can tap into. But the last point I made, and I know Elizabeth wants to dive into is, but don't use me to replace the huge retainer you're playing your recruiting agencies. If Korn Ferry, if Spencer Stewart, if these folks aren't delivering you diverse talent, fire them, because they aren't doing their jobs And they certainly aren't calling me or Randy or Elizabeth to say, hey, we don't even know where to begin to find this talent. That has to change.
Yeah, absolutely. And I see our good friend Paul has come back on. Paul, we could go on and on. There's so much.
No. You know what?
Sorry,
I am not going to be the middle-aged white guy that my management team sends in to tell Elizabeth that she can't get her last word in.
Yeah, absolutely.
So, Elizabeth, you go right ahead.
Yes, thank you.
Great.
I'm glad my reputation as a loose cannon is serving me well.
Oh, no kidding.
But look, I think there was a really good point that Randy said about framing, and it's what we've decided talent looks like. It's what we've decided talent is, and it really annoys me that in our sector, which is 65% women, you know, it annoys me every time a woman is put in charge of running an agency. They give her all this coverage in our trade publications. That shouldn't be a story. In an industry that's only 35% men, when a man's in charge, that should be the story. How have they become management? But we don't question that. Instead, we celebrate a woman who's in charge in an industry that's 65% female. That's ridiculous. And again, you know, this is all framing that we've decided, that we think is absolutely acceptable. It shouldn't be. I think the other thing about what talent looks like and sounds like, it's always wild to me how, you know, living in the UK where we're surrounded by so many fascinating talent, you know, accents from Scottish to Irish to Welsh, etc. Those are all considered absolutely fine, but you know, you throw in a black guy with an African accent and people struggle. I've had so many incredible talented people from other countries, from black, Asian, mixed race backgrounds, etc., who have been told they can't be put in front of a client because of their accent. And the amount of money I know people who've spent on elocution lessons and all this kind of stuff, you know, but of course we would never ever think the same thing of a guy with a strong Scottish accent. But that's because we've decided it's okay to be Scottish in PR, but it's not okay to be Nigerian in PR. And all those things are based on our own prejudice. We've all decided it's okay for a man to be in charge, but not a woman to be in charge. That's how we celebrate when a woman's given an agency. All those are things we've decided. So it's in our gift to change them, really.
Yeah. I mean, I think
definitely done that.
No, I think that fundamental, you know, language and framing and rethinking this culture, you know, and then having that with accountability and actual action that is checked up on. I think all of that came through loud and clear to me with incredible examples. So thank you all so much. And Paul, thank you. And I want to give a shout out to Artie because she was a champion of this panel and really, you know, encouraged us to be big and bold, and really appreciate every voice on this panel and the opportunity to share this with the audience and with me and everyone else. So thank you all so much.